Finally, stunning news, naval drones have broken through Russia's defenses. Putin's last breath, this changes everything. Crimea rout, the Russians have been driven from the peninsula. A devastating strike has crippled the occupiers. An offensive from Transnistria, Odessa is in the red zone. Putin is trying to make up for all his failures. Poland is urgently deploying nuclear weapons. All this and more in our episode Hellpoint. Our forces have hit the real jackpot. Ukrainian naval drones have infiltrated deep into Russia. Fast as lightning, they dealt Putin a massive defeat. The Russian air defense missed this moment. Then the drones struck enemy territory with aerial attacks. The Kremlin admitted that Russian troops are firing directly at houses. This is the beginning of the collapse. All of this was caught on video. You have to be the first to see these unique explosive shots.
The Russian armed forces are in turmoil, and even bigger shows are ahead. Just in the past few days, drones have attacked several Russian ports at once. In particular, they struck the Black Sea Fleet in Novorossiysk. According to Russian media, at first surface drones struck the port, and a few hours later the city center was attacked.
As long as there's no official confirmation of damage, it's all just a violation of safety protocols. Someone's smoking in the swamps, even out at sea.
As a result of the attack, operations at the Transneft oil loading facility and the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal near Novorossiysk were paralyzed. At the same time, 120 kilometers away in Sochi, a threat was also reported. Tourists began to be evacuated from the beaches due to the threat of surface drones.
Don't stand in the middle, don't get your feet wet, evacuate immediately. Everyone out of the water.
The commotion was met at the port of Tuapse. There, the oil terminal was attacked. This was also the work of surface drones. Videos have appeared online where you can hear bursts of gunfire and explosions, as well as see attempts to hit maneuvering surface objects.
The drone approaches the pier and strikes, despite coming under fire, apparently from automatic cannons and machine guns, judging by the splashes around the drone.
As we can see, unsuccessfully, one of Russia's largest oil transshipment terminals for tankers has been hit.
Such an outcome is quite natural, entirely expected after the devastating strikes on numerous oil refineries and the widespread destruction of critical installations vital to these plants. Naturally, Russian facilities are currently experiencing significant difficulties with their essential diesel fuel and gasoline supplies. A well-coordinated and impactful strike on the crucial export gateways of those very same prominent oil and gas companies will undoubtedly also cause the Russians plenty of truly unpleasant moments and considerable economic disruption.
The transshipment points in Tuapse and Novorossiysk together could export 2 million barrels of crude per day. And this means that even a single day of shutdown is a huge loss for Russia.
Roughly speaking, we'll call this chassis enormous for being capable from an economic point of view. Export channels for this crude are critically utilized to obtain essential foreign currency revenue, which is then strategically and often desperately used to finance the extensive and demanding military machine. Today, this situation is profoundly painful. It significantly affects the undeniable fact that not just the export of certain specific products is being reduced by a considerable percentage or even by tens of percent, but in some severe and alarming cases, the loss of thousands of units or even entire sectors will inevitably lead to what Dam so aptly called a paper tiger can simply and dramatically collapse under such immense and sustained pressure, revealing its inherent weaknesses and vulnerabilities.
And there are also less obvious consequences. Each time after such attacks, the Russians become convinced that air defense does not protect, but on the contrary poses an even greater threat. The inaccurate fire of the Russian military led to the destruction of residential buildings, the destruction of several cars, and also caused panic among the locals. There are also reports of several fatalities. And the media are hinting that it was the air defense because, for example, in Novorossiysk the day before, there was an order not to disclose the consequences of the drone strikes. But everything is being shown on television, which means that the burned cars and the hits on residential buildings are the result of the air defense's actions, not the drones.
Crimea is now defenseless. Russia's defensive fortifications are falling apart. The Ukrainian special operation is quietly and effectively driving the occupiers out of the peninsula. The Kremlin is already panicking and they're hanging by a thread. Soon, with one final move, Crimea will be cut off from Russia. Under the barrage of fire are the FSB, enemy units, and possibly even the head of the Kremlin circus himself. Shocking footage and details. Watch next.
The Russians are having problems in Crimea, and the further it goes, the more surprises await the enemy.
Crimea has gradually, if we draw an analogy, thanks to the entire defense of Ukraine, turned into a sort of Crimea meat grinder, an area similar to a meat grinder, where the destruction of the Russian army, Russian occupiers, and accordingly their weapons and equipment is constantly taking place.
Ukrainian defenders clearly understand where the Russian occupiers are located in occupied Crimea and are doing everything possible to drive them out of there.
The process of demilitarizing Crimea is currently ongoing. Indeed, this is an integral part of the deoccupation process.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, there are increasing problems with fuel, water, and military equipment. Ukrainian strikes are destroying enemy bases. The Russians are trying to conceal the scale of their losses. This refers to ground, air, and naval operations that our defenders are successfully carrying out.
Today, the Kremlin strikes hit those Russian military facilities, let me emphasize military facilities, that pose a threat both to the peninsula itself, because they are located on it, and in fact threaten other territories of our country. Today, the occupiers' equipment is being used to launch strikes with their outdated weaponry against our territory. This is what allows the Russians to conduct extensive operations in our airspace.
The regular idea is the elimination of enemy air defense facilities, destruction of naval targets and strikes against ground targets, including railways.
The air defense system in Crimea, which is currently operating actively, they are trying to repel Ukrainian attacks, but they are doing so very poorly. Among other things, it also functions as an enemy killing machine.
Problems with supplies are increasing on the peninsula, and Russian defensive positions are being destroyed.
Work is also underway on those key points that will open the door to Crimea for us. In particular, the Kinburn Spit, the Tendrivska Spit, and in fact, the territory of Crimea itself.
Almost every week, the destruction of Russian helicopters or air defense elements is recorded. This creates an atmosphere of fear among the occupiers and forces them to conserve resources. Ukrainian drones have even reached government dachas. On the night of September 22nd, explosions were heard in the Foros area. Russian collaborators reported that drones struck the territory of the Foros sanatorium. It was reported that 3 people were killed and 16 wounded.
Russia did not remain silent about the fact that at the time of the attack on the Foros sanatorium, it was a meeting place for high-ranking officials, or at least all those responsible in the Russian Federation. This is objective control, as we call it from the Russian side, with the dead, with the wounded, with civilian casualties. We still haven't seen it. And that's the first thing the Russian Federation would have done if it had really happened that way.
Russia did not remain silent about the fact that at the time of the attack, there were very important guests at the sanatorium, though exactly who they were was not specified. On the sanatorium's public page on social media, an announcement was posted that on September 21st, the Foros Hall restaurant would be closed for special service. But on all Russian news channels, they are showing only the school, which is located nearby.
The assembly hall of the school suffered the most damage here. Part of the ceiling has collapsed. Just look at what's left of one of the walls. From the damage, it's clear that the drone flew in through this window. Now there are fragments scattered everywhere here.
Russia is not reporting that these schools were closed for the holidays and there were no students there. They are simply trying to cover up their latest terrorist attacks on our country with misinformation. This is what the Russians always do. Well, once again, it's not just solely about the main school building itself. It's also very much about the adjacent boarding house with the exact same name, Terletsky, which is conveniently located directly across from the school building.
Nearby is also the government dacha number 11, Object Zarya. There is a helicopter pad here, so the FSO is always present, and they can be brought in to provide security for meetings. And of course, there is air defense as well.
We are demonstrating that today, with various firepower means, the defense forces can reach the occupiers anywhere in our Crimea, anywhere in the north, south, west, or east. And today there is not a single facility that cannot be struck by the defense forces on the territory of Crimea. Once again, Russian air defense has proven its ineffectiveness. They are incapable of protecting either Russia or the temporarily occupied territories. The air defense system of Crimea is being destroyed, and this is the path to the demilitarization of Crimea, and most importantly, its deoccupation. You're on the right track.
The Russian air fleet on the occupied peninsula has been reduced as a result of the successful combat operations of the Special Unit of Ukraine's Defense Intelligence, Privati. 3 enemy multi-purpose Mi-8 helicopters were hit, as well as the Russian Nebo-U radar station.
4 helicopters have been destroyed, and in just a few days, 2 unique B-12 Chaika aircraft were also destroyed. There are actually very few of them in the Black Sea Fleet. If there were 6, 2 have already been destroyed.
The scouts showed footage of the operation and video of the wreckage of one of the destroyed Mi-8 helicopters. Occupied Crimea has become a symbol of a fuel collapse. It was here that large amounts of fuel were brought in to refuel Russian military equipment. As a result, there is now a shortage and record high prices on the peninsula. The rise in gasoline prices is linked to Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries. The video shows Sevastopol. In Yalta, gasoline was delivered to one of the gas stations. The line of people wanting to refuel is enormous. Neither the Russian authorities nor the occupation authorities in Crimea acknowledge the problem. They insist that the issue is only about logistics. Instances of human rights violations in Crimea are regularly documented and submitted to the UN Council on Human Rights and the OSCE. The Russian occupation administration is forcibly conscripting Crimeans into the ranks of the Russian armed forces, and refusal to serve is punished with criminal prosecution. In addition, there is ongoing militarization of children. Crimea is waiting to return, and Ukraine is not giving Russia the opportunity to normalize the occupation.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. Urgent: Russia is advancing from Transnistria. Moscow has resorted to madness, and Kremlin agents are sowing chaos. A decisive week for Putin. Kremlin agents have begun their insidious work inside Moldova. The final point will surprise absolutely everyone in Odessa. It's worth staying alert. More on this in just a moment.
Everything will be decided this coming weekend. Russia, by disrupting the elections, is trying to seize power in Moldova and overthrow the government. After that, Ukraine could be used as a springboard for an attack on Ukraine. And with such a video addressed to the nation, President Maya Sandu spoke out.
If Russia gains control over Moldova, the consequences will be immediate, and they will threaten both our country and the entire region. Freedom of movement could come to an end, and our land could become a springboard for infiltration into the Odessa region. The Transnistrian region will be destabilized.
Moreover, it is precisely Transnistria that poses a particular danger today. Experts believe so.
Let me remind you, Moldova shares a 1,222-kilometer border with Ukraine. Moldova is not a large country, but important infrastructure projects, so to speak, connect us with Ukraine. That's why the stakes are high.
There, traditionally, the population has the most pro-Russian sentiments, and it is clear that the Moldovan authorities have not done enough work with them all these years.
Politicians have called on Maya Sandu to take control of Transnistria. This pro-Russian enclave today is a huge problem, not only for her country, but for the entire European continent. Of course, it's not solely her responsibility, but the main role in this matter truly belongs to her. If she had initiated the appropriate processes and changed the agenda regarding Transnistria, she would have far fewer problems today.
They decided to tackle the issue only at the final stage. Less than a week before the parliamentary elections themselves, Moldova began identifying and detaining possible participants in the unrest that the Kremlin is already preparing for election day.
This is connected to the forceful protests being prepared after the elections. As before, the criminal world is part of this common system of post-Soviet thieves' law. With the help of these people and these structures, forceful protests were being prepared both inside prisons and among those at large. Today, just this morning, the police, together with the special services and the information and security service, carried out operations to prevent these actions.
Thus, during searches on September 22nd in Moldova, 74 people were detained who are suspected of undergoing training in Serbia to organize rallies and protests. In particular, they were trained abroad in handling firearms and special equipment. For this, the participants received about 400 euros. Law enforcement officials claim that Russian special services are behind the operation, and the suspects are connected both to Moldovan political parties and to criminal groups. At the same time, the investigation itself has been ongoing since July of this year. But the use of force is only part of the Kremlin's tactics, having practiced in Romania. In Moldova, they also decided to use mass interference in the elections through social media.
That is to say, they deliberately recorded an absolutely insane number of very short videos for platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, specifically for those social media channels. And all of this is distributed in Romanian and Russian, but with Moldovan themes to specifically attract our citizens. And this is what they are betting on.
For those who are older and haven't mastered TikTok yet, there's their own program. The same Russian Orthodox Church, which has assimilated in Moldova, but still pursues the same goals: complete subordination to Moscow.
The Orthodox Church, which is historical, and the Russian Federation, as if it had relocated here, continues to assert its influence to this day. In this way, they express their nobility through their love for Russia. And so orthodoxy, specifically orthodoxy in the Russian style, serves as a point of connection, a channel of communication with Russia for them. Well, and of course, Russia uses this to strengthen its political influence as well as to increase its economic, and if we talk about separatist influence in the region.
At the same time, analysts point out that the political structure of Moldova is organized in such a way that the parliament has significantly broader powers, including those related to the country's foreign policy direction. That is why parliamentary elections are even more important than the election of the country's leader.
It seems to me that, unfortunately, there isn't this understanding. Well, if we talk about society as a whole in percentage terms, there isn't an understanding of the degree of threat, because I think that if everyone already, we've had the pro-Russian Voronin in power, then he was replaced, then there was the pro-Russian Dodon, and again he was replaced. But all this was before the illness of that same northern dictator reached such an extreme stage when he attacks neighboring countries and sends drones over the European Union. And I think that if this time we end up in his clutches again, it won't be as easy to get out as it was last time.
Experts also believe that this week will remain tense right up until the elections, which will take place this weekend. At the same time, the authorities are urging people to stay vigilant around the clock, since this is essentially Russia's last chance to divert Moldova from European integration by relatively peaceful means.
The Kremlin lost the first phase of the hybrid war in the fall of 2024, when it tried to disrupt the referendum and the re-election of Maia Sandu. And now the battle is unfolding for control over the parliament.
This is a dangerous bomb. Poland is seriously pressing the nuclear button. Russia has outplayed itself at its own game. Such a weapon changes the rules instantly. Putin, pack your bags. Mega deliveries are bursting onto the scene, and the Allies are already truly impressed by Ukraine's breakthrough. Will Europe's priorities switch to a new track? We'll tell you right now.
Europe's new nuclear ambition. Poland is ready to become a country with its own nuclear shield.
As the President of the Republic of Poland, I believe that Poland should participate in nuclear sharing. It should have its own nuclear, energy, civil and military capabilities.
According to Nawrocki, on this issue, Poland is counting on the support of France. For Warsaw, this is not just about an alliance, but a way to obtain exactly the kind of weapon that will change the rules of the game in Europe. Such a move is a challenge both to Moscow and to Brussels.
This statement by the Polish president came shortly after an unprecedented attack by Russian drones on Poland. And although this time dozens of drones were reconnaissance drones that did not pose any direct military threat, many in Warsaw continue to fear that the attack could be repeated. And next time they could be strike drones carrying out actual attacks.
To strengthen nuclear cooperation, Poland is preparing to sign a new treaty. This document is intended to deepen cooperation in the fields of defense and security. Although Nawrocki admits that it is still too early to talk about this, his opposition is clear. Poland intends to take part in nuclear sharing.
Poland's active participation in obtaining nuclear weapons from a key ally clearly demonstrates the significant level of concern presently evident in many Central European countries. This is particularly true given the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war and the apparent lack of a comprehensive understanding among Western leaders about how they can genuinely stop this devastating war in the foreseeable future and effectively counter Russia's aggressive ambitions, which are actively and consistently supported from the very top. And there is a growing and increasingly widespread understanding that if Vladimir Putin's relentless desire to continue the protracted and devastating war against Ukraine indefinitely is not decisively stopped by concerted Western efforts, and with the current political climate and the potential return of Donald Trump, hopes here are unfortunately quite slim, then this terrible and escalating conflict will inevitably keep taking on new and more dangerous forms and, in the end, will regrettably cross Ukraine's sovereign borders.
Alarmed by the recent aerial incursion, Poland has quickly begun to adopt Ukraine's experience in combating Russian drones. At that time, the Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Defense of Poland, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, together with a delegation from the Ministry of Defense and the country's armed forces, were present. The focus was on daily military technical cooperation, further support for Ukraine's defense, and the overall security situation in the context of Russian aggression.
Now we see that one way or another, this is one of the prime examples of necessity. It's not just that Ukraine is adopting military experience from the West, but now the story is going in the opposite direction, because this is a country that needs to adopt a significant part of Ukraine's wartime experience. Modern wars, real wars, are not exactly in line with the textbooks taught at the best military academies of NATO, with all due respect to their experience. And this, in fact, creates an additional marker of our mutual dependence.
Warsaw and Kyiv have also agreed to cooperate in the field of countering drones, exchanging information about aerial threats, and implementing technology for countering the use of reconnaissance and strike drones.
A possible analysis by Russia, a kind of reconnaissance of how Europe would act in the event of the outbreak of an armed conflict. If Russia, for example, violates airspace seriously for real, then what response forces could be mobilized? What do they look like, from where and how many? What kind of aircraft take off? In other words, it's all purely about understanding the framework of response. If Russia is indeed conducting such analysis at a serious level, then that's a sign that we really need to prepare for a serious military confrontation between Western and Russian armed forces, regardless of what happens with Ukraine and whether the war in Ukraine ends or not.
At the same time, Poland is launching an unprecedented rearmament program. Its expenditures are enormous, including not only combat aircraft and helicopters, but also a wide range of armored vehicles, tube and rocket artillery systems, modern air defense complexes, and munitions. At the same time, Warsaw is actively ramping up its own weapons production. In addition, next year Poland has planned a record defense budget, 200 billion zlotys, or about $55 billion, which amounts to approximately 4.8% of GDP. Work is also underway to significantly increase the size of the armed forces, from 200,000 to 500,000 personnel. The Polish authorities emphasize this in every possible way. The country will use all available resources to guarantee its own security.
A masterclass from Ukrainian ballistics, the Flamingo is going mainstream. Production is going at 4 times the previous intensity. The Kremlin is not pleased. Our forces are pressing on, and a secret mega-weapon is being prepared to turn the tide. This arsenal of domestic weaponry is truly astonishing. Don't miss the first footage and shocking details coming up next.
A new level and scale, Ukraine is ramping up the production of cruise missiles. The developers of the Ukrainian Flamingo missile have announced that the enterprise is producing 50 missiles per month and plans to reach a daily output of 7 missiles by the end of the year. The company claims that scaling up is made possible by their proprietary wing manufacturing technology, which shortens the production cycle. Let us remind you that the Ukrainian missile can fly up to 3,000 kilometers and carry a ton of explosives. In August, the Flamingo struck Russian targets in temporarily occupied Crimea. Early in the morning, 3 missiles were launched from the Ukrainian coast. A base of Russian border guards managed by the aggressor's Federal Security Service was hit. Additionally, the Flamingo manufacturers announced the development of their own ballistic missiles FP7 and FP9, as well as air defense systems. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine is able to create innovations, develop its defense industry, and effectively implement them on the battlefield.
It was precisely during the years of the full-scale invasion that Ukraine's defense sector made a revolutionary breakthrough in the production of Ukrainian ballistic missiles. First and foremost, this is accordingly the modernized version of Neptune. However, the anti-ship version of Neptune was modernized to strike land targets. And at the moment, as a result of improved technical and tactical characteristics, according to the developers' estimates, Neptune's strike range is up to 1,000 kilometers. In addition, the armed forces of Ukraine are equipped with the already mentioned Sapsan operational tactical complex with a strike range of up to 500 kilometers. Plus, during the years of war, the Ukrainian defense forces have demonstrated a unique ability to modernize even Soviet-era weapon systems. This refers to the anti-aircraft missile system S-200.
Also, one of the most important developments has been missile drones such as Polyanitsia Pekla, Ruta, and Bars.
During the prolonged period of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's defense industry has rapidly and significantly evolved to produce its own advanced strike weapons. And accordingly, let's also mention the strike drone. Here, according to KLG, which is an official and significant recognition of Ukraine's remarkable achievements, Ukraine currently holds truly leading positions in this particular field.
The armed forces of Ukraine are successfully striking military targets in the Russian Federation, particularly oil refineries using unmanned systems. Drone attacks have disabled up to 17% of Russia's oil refining capacity. Moreover, Ukraine is actively working on the production of interceptor drones. The Minister of Defense stated that Kyiv will soon reach the capacity to deploy at least 1,000 of these UAVs per day to defend against Russian attacks.
Ukraine is taking a leading position in the production of interceptor drones. This is Ukrainian innovation. To understand the situation, during the latest provocation by the Russian Federation, specifically the violation of Polish airspace, neutralizing Buran decoy drones costing $10,000 each was required. The air defense systems of the country used missiles costing $1.5 million each. Meanwhile, on the Ukrainian side, they are currently scaling up the so-called tactic of drone swarms, namely the use of interceptor drones.
Ukraine is also developing a new air defense system of the air-to-air class, capable of covering large areas. All this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weaponry capable of destroying important enemy military targets at long distances.
That's all from me for now. This was Drina Hutsakalo with you. Even more hot news from the front in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.